My parents chose my brother's award over visiting me after a car crash. Now they want my savings to bail him out of a fraud scandal. I refused. About 2 weeks ago, I, 32, was involved in a horrific car accident. Another automobile struck me from the side as I was making my way home from work. The force of the impact caused my automobile to overturn. I was later told by the paramedics that I was fortunate to be alive. I ultimately needed emergency surgery due to internal bleeding. 2 cracked ribs and a damaged leg. After the procedure, I stayed in the hospital for a week to recuperate and try to make sense of things. It was difficult to be in the hospital, both mentally and physically. All I wanted was for my parents to come see me as soon as I woke up. I assumed that as soon as they learned about the accident, they would rush over, even though I didn't anticipate them staying the entire time. I would have been so grateful for a visit. Rather, they were absent for days. I waited for them to stop by or at least give me a call, but they didn't show up. Before I even received a text from them, I believe it was 4 days. To answer your question, my parents were told what had transpired. The hospital informed me that they had contacted them several times and that they are my emergency contacts. A day following my admission, the hospital was able to contact my parents, but the nurses reported that they appeared unconcerned about the situation. That obviously upset me a lot, but I attempted to explain it away by saying that perhaps they were too busy, or that something else had come up. Fortunately, my phone was still with me because my possessions survived the collision. Every day, at intervals of 5 to 6 hours, I texted my parents, but I never heard back in the hospital. Every day was a nightmare. I attempted to give my parents a lot of wiggle room because I really wanted to see people I knew, but it became more difficult every hour. Fortunately, I wasn't entirely alone because my pals who reside in other states were able to get in touch with some family members who live nearby. A family acquaintance came to visit me on the 6th day in the hospital and remarked in passing how wonderful it was that my brother was receiving recognition for his efforts at an award ceremony. I didn't know what she was discussing. She filled me in, but she appeared perplexed that I didn't know. As it happens, my parents didn't come to see me. Instead, they were at my brother's award ceremony. They were aware that I was in the hospital, but instead of helping me through a difficult period, they decided to attend my brother's special occasion. They were so busy getting ready for his big event that they had taken so long to get in touch with me. They were more concerned with their perception of his ceremony than with their daughter's injury. Let me be clear. Before anyone accuses me of jealously admiring my brother, I don't find it hard to see why they would be proud of him. I am aware that he is gifted and has put a lot of effort into all that he has accomplished. He has always been the golden child, which is the problem. Since we were little, he has received nothing but acclaim for everything he does. While I have largely gone unnoticed, he currently works for a large corporation and is really successful. Therefore, this award meant a lot to him. However, I was actually convalescing from surgery. A visit or even a phone call to check on me would have been the very least they could have done. I only wanted my parents to be concerned about me, and that was about all I was asking for. They didn't even blink an eyelash when I could have died that day. I was angry and humiliated. I attempted, but was unable to explain my parents' actions. I then made the decision to contact them and let them know how offended I was. I texted them to express my disbelief that they prioritized my brother's prize over my well-being. I expressed my pain at them, not even checking in on me. I didn't have to wait long for an answer for the first time since the accident. And to be honest, I wish they hadn't responded. Their words simply made me feel worse. At first, they attempted to defend their behavior by claiming that they couldn't miss my brother's award because it was a once-in-a-lifetime accomplishment. I informed them that if they had only taken the time to come see me sooner, they wouldn't have missed the event at all. After a while, they gave up trying to argue with me and told me that it was pointless to waste time coming to see me while my brother was out there making the family proud. That hurt more than words can express. It seemed like they only considered me as an afterthought. I wish I could say that their behavior astonished me, but it has always been like this. My brother was perfect as a child. Every action he took was praised. Every accomplishment he made, whether it was a scholarship, a fancy job, or perfect grades, was celebrated. In the meantime, I was constantly in the background. It was never good enough. Even when I performed well, every error I made was viewed as a disaster, and I never received the same level of help. I had the impression that they had already determined I was a failure, and that nothing I did would change their thoughts. A week after my brother's award ceremony, my parents unexpectedly arrived at the hospital. I was initially perplexed because following our last talk, I had given up on contacting them. I knew my parents well enough to understand that they weren't worried when they came to see me. They arrived with phony smiles on their faces and bouquets in their hands. They made an effort to strike up a conversation about how I was doing, but it was obvious that their thoughts were elsewhere. I advised them to just say what was on their mind because I could tell that whatever they were thinking about was going to irritate me. The fact that they showed so little concern for my survival was offensive enough. I didn't need their phony pity. I didn't have to exert much effort. When my mother learned that my brother had been arrested for fraud at his company, she burst into tears. It turned out that my brother was at the heart of a huge fraud scheme that was discovered by the corporation he worked for. He had been directing funds into his personal investments by falsifying the company's accounts following an internal investigation. Everything was turned over to the police, and he was apprehended after a co-worker alerted the superiors. He is currently being charged with major offenses like wire fraud, forgery, and embezzlement. My parents had apparently already spent a large portion of their cash on hiring attorneys for him. They came to me because they didn't have enough money left to pay his bail. They asked me to utilize the money I had saved up for my work as a project manager at an IT business to help him out. Additionally, they asked whether I knew anyone who could help in any manner or pull some strings. I had the impression that I was merely a tool to clean up my brother's mess, not even their daughter. I continued to experience mental and physical pain. It was unbelievable to me that they would turn to me for assistance. After everything. It was like being slapped across the face when I was laying in a hospital bed after surgery, afraid and alone. They didn't give a damn. But now that their favorite child was in danger, they needed me. I felt bad about it. Perhaps I ought to have assisted for the benefit of my family. The other side of me, though, was angry. The same brother who has always had everything handed to him. Why should I save him? My parents have always protected him, so he has never experienced any repercussions. Now they expect me to do the same. I informed them that I would not assist. I said that even if I did have the money, I wouldn't feel obligated to help him out. I made it obvious who they cared about more and reminded them that they hadn't even come to see me yet. They insisted that I was being self-centered and that family should be together. I couldn't get myself to care, even though they said I would regret not helping my brother. To be honest, my brother has always taken precedence over me. I was never enough for them, no matter how hard I tried. They wanted me to simply forget all the times they disregarded me, left me out, and made me feel unimportant. Now that they needed something from me, I felt in control of the situation for the first time in my life, and I wasn't going to let that go. I'm laying in my hospital bed right now feeling a mixture of anger and remorse. Since I said no, my parents haven't spoken to me and I know they're upset. But I simply can't bring myself to care any longer. I'm done trying to gain their approval. I've wasted too much time AITA for standing up to my parents after everything they've done to me and not helping my brother. They keep repeating that family should always remain together. Therefore, I feel like I might be the villain, However, the way they have treated me throughout my life, and particularly now, is something I simply cannot get over. I feel like I've had enough, but I'm not sure what to do. First update. Hello, everybody. I wanted to express my gratitude for your support of my initial article. I was able to maintain my position because of that, although I didn't anticipate updating so quickly. A lot has transpired since then. I was eventually released from the hospital a few days after my parents arrived. I can walk, but my leg fracture requires crutches, and breathing is still difficult as my ribs heal. Going home, finding some serenity, and escaping the turmoil were all things I was looking forward to the moment I arrived at my apartment. That hope was dashed. I knew things wouldn't go well. As soon as I spotted my folks who were waiting for me just outside my door, they must have called the hospital to find out the precise time of my discharge, because I hadn't told them. They wasted no time at all. They began hammering me before I could even remove my keys. They were incensed and informed me that by not helping my brother, I had gone too far. It's the most irate I've ever seen them. They seemed more unhappy with me for refusing than they were with my brother's deception. They talked endlessly about how family should always come first. They said I was selfish and vindictive. They claimed that I was using this circumstance as a means of exacting revenge on them because I had resentment toward my brother. They didn't care that I was still recovering from my near-death experience a week prior. They simply viewed me as a barrier to their beloved son's rescue. They had the audacity to say that they expected me to step up now. They said that this was my opportunity to show that I wasn't a letdown and that I could be part of the family by acting morally. It was crazy. They essentially acknowledged that I wasn't related to them and that helping my brother was the only way I could make amends. Things truly took a turn for the worst when I informed them outright that I wouldn't do it. My mother began crying at my door, screaming things like, "We've already lost one child and now we're going to lose two, and you're punishing us for loving him more." In contrast, my dad simply became more irate and wasn't attempting to shame me. He repeatedly accused me of being cold-hearted and self-centered, claiming that I had no regard for the family and that I would regret it once they were gone. To be honest, it was everything I could do to not lose it. I was told I was a bad person for not cleaning up my brother's mess, even though I was already fatigued from the hospital stay and could not stand on my crutches. The fact that my parents intentionally treated my brother better and that they love him more than I did just served to exacerbate the situation. I didn't give up, though. I warned them that I would call the police if they didn't leave, and that I wouldn't pay a dime for his bail or legal bills. After that, they eventually backed off, but not before insulting me once again. My brother's case made headlines a few days after that onslaught at the door. It seems that the deception was far larger than we initially believed. Evidence that he had been transferring business funds for more than a year, some of which had been laundered through fictitious business accounts in his name, was discovered by the police. Additionally, as part of a broader inquiry, they found that he had assisted several colleagues in concealing their embezzled funds. My brother is now being charged with conspiracy and money laundering in addition to fraud. He might spend a significant amount of time behind bars if convicted. The fallout has been harsh. My parents are really freaked out. My brother's reputation has been utterly destroyed after they boasted about his accomplishments to everyone they knew for years. People aren't buying into their attempts to control the situation by claiming that it's all a misunderstanding and that it will all be resolved when word spread that his son was embroiled in a significant fraud case. My dad even lost a significant client. They're fumbling, and it's obvious they don't know what to do. Naturally, they came stumbling back to me. They made no effort to conceal their desperation this time. They indicated they needed my assistance just this once to get through this, because they were under a lot of stress. They insisted that they would have an opportunity to fix things and keep the family together. if I helped my brother. But I understood exactly what that meant. Keeping the family together meant preserving the appearance that their ideal kid had done nothing wrong, and fixing things meant hiding his transgressions. They've gone completely silent after I told them no once more. Nothing. No texts, no calls. They seem to have given up on me. To be honest, they most likely view me as a hopeless failure who abandoned the family when they most needed her. But what do you know? I no longer give a damn. I feel like I'm in charge for the first time in my life, knowing that my parents just saw me as a fallback option. Someone to control in case something goes wrong hurts. However, it also feels fantastic to put myself first for once and to finally say no to appease them. I won't help my brother, and I won't allow them to use guilt to get me to correct a situation they started. They must now deal with the repercussions of their decisions. Second update. Since many of you have been inquiring about my condition, the truth is that things have gotten even more problematic. It was my brother who sent me an email. Since he doesn't have access to a phone while incarcerated, he persuaded one of his friends, who still maintains his innocence, to contact me on his behalf. I was initially inclined to simply remove it without reading it. I assumed it was just another attempt to use guilt to get me to assist him. However, my curiosity overcame me and I opened it. My brother said he was being framed in the email, although he vowed he wasn't the mastermind. He acknowledged that he was a part of the fraud at his company. He claims that the superiors used him as a scapegoat to hide their own wrongdoing. He even said that while he was trapped taking the fall, certain powerful executives were still able to move freely. He pleaded with me for assistance, not for our parents, but because he believed that I was the only one who could save the family from disintegrating entirely. I was genuinely offended by that line. Perhaps it was because my brother finally admitted how poisonous our parents have been. He acknowledged that they have consistently mistreated me and exploited him to stroke their egos. Seeing him acknowledge that was odd because he had always complied with it. I couldn't get rid of the impression, though, that he was just saying anything he felt would persuade me to assist him. He also said that I should help him by saving the family, which is what my parents have been saying ever since this fiasco began. I kept asking myself if there was any truth to what he was saying. Even though I promised myself I was done with all of this, could it be that he was actually being set up? What if I was mistaken about how huge this was? I wanted to know for sure. Part of me. I therefore made the decision to investigate. I mentioned the problem to a buddy of mine who was a lawyer and whom I trusted since they were not involved in the case. They were unable to provide me with a complete legal breakdown. However, they did offer me some guidance on where to find additional information. After doing some additional research, I discovered that my brother's story wasn't entirely untrue. There was no doubt that he was a fraudster. However, based on my understanding, it appeared that he wasn't the one controlling everything. Evidently, he was not the only victim of the fraud plan. My brother was utilized as a pawn by several high-level executives who had been transferring corporate funds for years, since he was responsible for overseeing specific accounts. He was held solely responsible when things went south. My brother was left holding the bag because these superiors had purposefully separated themselves from the grunt work. I felt torn after learning all of this. I was upset that he was involved in something so dubious in the first place. On the one hand, he was involved in a serious crime, regardless of whether he was the mastermind or merely a pawn. He wasn't just an innocent bystander who unknowingly became involved in anything. He followed through because he knew what he was doing. Most likely, he believed he would never be caught. However, I did feel a little sorry for him. At the same time, knowing that he was exploited by those with greater strength and expertise in hiding their trails is difficult. It's obvious that those executives were well-versed in their roles and made sure my brother would bear the brunt of any negative outcomes. If he hadn't been raised in a household that encouraged him to take shortcuts. As long as you were successful on the outside, I couldn't help but wonder how things may have turned out. He most likely believed that he was untouchable because of our parents' unceasing protection and adulation. My folks were unexpectedly silent when I told them what I had discovered. Although they didn't want to acknowledge it, I believed that they secretly understood my brother wasn't an innocent victim. They persisted in promoting the same story, claiming that I was selfish for not prioritizing the family and callous for not assisting him rather than admitting the reality. It was like speaking to a stone wall when you spoke to them. I've made the decision to stop interacting with them at this time. I've made up my mind and I'm sticking with it. No matter how much he wants to blame the executives, my brother still made his bed and now has to lie about it. My parents are at fault if they wish to continue supporting him. If the situations were reversed, I wouldn't ruin myself trying to help someone who wouldn't do anything for me. To be honest, I've not felt so at ease in a long time. Even though my family will never believe it, I know I made the right decision. I've been treated like I didn't matter for far too long, and I'm sick of it. Although my brother's predicament is awful, I am not responsible for fixing it. Once again, I want to thank everyone who has helped me along the way. Although it hasn't been simple, it has been a huge comfort to know that I'm not the only one who feels this way. Third update. I now have enough information to provide you all with an update. Even though it has been more than a month since my last post, I'll start with what my parents did when they realized that insulting me and pleading with me wouldn't work. They made the decision to do something else, which was to make me even more miserable than I already was. They contacted several of my aunts, uncles, and cousins to express their disdain and selfishness for not helping my brother. They gave the impression that my refusal to assist was motivated by spite, and that I was simply sitting on a mound of money. All they said was that I was a monster and should not be trusted. Only until one of my cousins contacted me and informed me that my parents were spreading unfavorable rumors about me. Did I learn the truth? They cleverly omitted the fact that they left me in the hospital and hadn't contacted me since, completely twisting the tale to make it seem like I was harboring resentment. I was only ever summoned to assist my brother. I was hurt at first, even though I had defended myself. It seemed like I was being punished again. I believed that I would be left on my own with no one to support me. However, an unforeseen event occurred. Several distant relatives began contacting me rather than supporting my parents. It turns out that my parents' treatment of others and constant emphasis on my brother caused them to sour relations with a lot of individuals over the years. I was unaware of the depth of this. I started hearing stories from relatives I hadn't spoken to in years, and to be honest, they were all more startling than the last. My brother once borrowed a substantial amount of money from her husband to invest in a business venture, according to an aunt who informed me about it. Naturally, the plan failed, and my parents severed all ties with my aunt when she attempted to recoup her money. They even propagated the idea that my aunt was avaricious and unsupportive of her family. According to another cousin, my brother blamed a parking lot attendant for my uncle's car crash at a family gathering a few years ago to keep the family from being embarrassed. My parents supported him and made sure the rumor didn't get out. They accused my uncle of attempting to damage my brother's reputation when he attempted to address them about it. There were several examples, like this one where my parents either covered up my brother's wrongdoing or silenced anyone who dared to speak up. My brother and another family member had a business partnership, but my parents ruined it because they believed the relative wasn't renowned enough to be affiliated with their son. According to one relative, it was both startling and reassuring to hear all of this. I wasn't insane. It's true that my parents have a long history of ignoring others and hiding behind my brother for a long time. I believe that I was somehow to blame for my parents' treatment of me, that perhaps I wasn't good enough or didn't live up to their standards. It was never about me, though, as I now see they constantly wanted to keep my brother safe at any costs. They even avoided family members who questioned them or obstructed their path. For those who wonder why my parents were so in need of my assistance, the answer is because I have established a strong life for myself in spite of their lack of encouragement. I've developed excellent relationships and managed my finances wisely in my role as project manager for a reputable IT company. I've saved money and made prudent investments. My parents knew I had the money, which is why they were so frantic. They failed to realize, however, that I didn't want to help just because I could, especially for those who have treated me like an afterthought my whole life. There has been an update on my brother's case. My parents eventually gathered together enough cash from loans and favors to get him out of jail after I refused to bail him out. However, the inquiry was far from finished. My brother made the decision to assist the authorities a few weeks ago. According to what I understand, he provided information about the higher-ups who were complicit in the scam, which aided in the prosecution's progress. He was able to receive a lighter sentence as a result of his cooperation. He will serve a year and then perform community service in lieu of years in prison. To be honest, that doesn't make me feel any better. His cooperation is commendable, but that doesn't change the fact that he initially decided to participate in the plot. Furthermore, I don't think this event will significantly alter my brother. I don't think he will quit having my parents clean up his mess anytime soon. For my part, I've decided to permanently cut off contact with my parents, which I probably should have done a long time ago. They are blocked on all of my platforms. I even instructed the front desk of my building to deny them entry if they returned without warning. I'm tired of serving as their fallback option, scapegoat, or emotional target. I'm surprisingly not depressed about it. I had assumed that leaving my family would be a great loss, but instead it feels liberating. I can now live my life without having to continually compare myself to my brother or ask for morsels of affection from people who would never show it to me. The family members who got in touch have been incredible. They've shown me that I'm not alone, and I feel supported for the first time in a long time. It's weird because after years of my parents excluding me, I've unexpectedly found a family. In fact, I'm excited to get to know these relatives better because many of them have invited me to family events that my parents won't be there. One of my aunts even expressed regret for not recognizing the situation sooner. She claimed that although she always thought something wasn't right with the way my parents treated me, she kept quiet about it because she didn't want to start a fight. She is now one of my biggest supporters, along with a few other family members for the first time. I feel hopeful, even though I have no idea what the future contains. I appreciate all of your help and guidance during this trip. Reading your comments helped me realize that I wasn't insane for sticking up for myself, even though it hasn't been easy. It feels so amazing to finally feel like I'm in charge of my life. Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more shocking real-life stories happening around you. Story 2. My brother stole my inheritance, gaslit me into therapy, and tried to lock me away, but I turned the tables before my 18th birthday. My brother Ryan was supposed to have it all figured out, so when our parents' bus collided with a pole and contacted them, I trusted him to take me in. Fortunately, he did. But something was off. He was absolutely dispassionate, viewing the funeral plans as errands rather than trauma. But at the time, it didn't seem unusual because Ryan was the sort that always had his faces together, while I was struggling to learn algebra. He was in his senior year preparing to graduate as valedictorian. While I fought to keep my grades up, he was already making six figures every year, so I let Ryan handle everything. "Don't worry about any of this, Emma," he murmured, going through files in Dad's office the day after the burial. "Just focus on finishing junior year." Moving inside his apartment felt weird. He had this sterile downtown space that was all glass and chrome. Unlike our parents' house, which was filled with Mom's quilts and Dad's baseball memorabilia, we were sitting around eating kebabs one day when he announced that he was going to sell our parents' property. My fork clattered on my plate. It appears that neither of us could pay the mortgage, property taxes, or maintenance. My rage was immediately replaced by compassionate understanding. After all, Ryan was in finance, so I felt he knew what he was saying. "I'll handle it." His tone silenced any argument. "That's why I'm your guardian, to make these decisions." The house was sold within a month. Ryan stated that the market was hot and he couldn't pass up the opportunity. I was not permitted to attend the closing. School became my only escape. My grades actually improved, possibly because I immersed myself in homework to avoid thinking. Ryan appeared pleased. He would examine my progress online and nod an approval of my test scores. He established a rigid routine: school homework and bedtime by 10 a.m. No parties and no dating. You need stability right now, he said. It seemed like I was living with a warden. Yet everyone told me how fortunate I was that Ryan had taken me in. One night I found him talking on the phone with someone. His voice was different, animated and almost joyous. No, it's perfect timing. The trust matures when she's 18, but his guardian. I have full discretion over distributions. He saw me and suddenly ended the call. Private conversation. Emma learned to have boundaries. For a while, we lived as roommates. He'd feed me, but that was it. We never communicated, and I sometimes felt ignored until one day when it actually happened. Senior year approached, and college acceptance letters began to arrive, including from Northwestern, my ideal school. I rushed to show Ryan. He scarcely glanced at it. Too expensive, but with financial aid and the college fund. There is no college fund. The words struck me like freezing water. What? Your parents didn't plan well? The house sale barely covered their debts. That's not true. Dad showed me the statements. Something was not right. Dad had been quite conscientious about money. He had shown me the college savings account just months before the accident, proud of how much they had accumulated. I began paying attention. Ryan received correspondence from investment firms and hastily tucked it away. He would promptly trash the bank statements. Once I noticed a tax paperwork on his desk, something regarding trust distribution. My heart sank. Ryan had treated our parents' debts as an ATM. I needed proof that night, after Ryan had left for his evening gym practice. I slipped into his home office. The door was locked, but I'd learned how to open it with a bobby pin from YouTube tutorials during my solitude. My hands shook as I turned the handle. His desk was nicely arranged. Files are tagged by year. I began with a folder labeled Estate Documents. My breath caught there. It was a trust fund statement for $450,000 due to mature on my 18th birthday. Another document revealed life insurance benefits of $300,000. My folks weren't in debt. They had left us everything. I could hear the front door. Ryan was back early. I pushed the papers back, my heart pounding as I slid out and along the corridor. I just made it to my room before his footsteps entered the office. Ryan kept an eye on me throughout breakfast. The following morning, "You look tired. Just stressed about college applications." His eyes narrowed slightly. "I told you, community college is your best option." I nodded and played along as my mind raced. I needed to document everything. But how? Ryan monitored my phone, reviewed my laptop's web history, and even approved my school email. At school, I began using the library computers during lunchtime. I set up a new email account and began investigating guardianship legislation. What I discovered made my stomach slip. Ryan, my guardian, had broad control over my fortune until I reached 18. However, there were meant to be oversights and reporting to the court. I printed the articles and hid them in my old algebra textbook. Nobody would look there, especially Ryan, who took pleasure in never failing with math. Days turned into weeks of thorough inquiry. I'd wait until Ryan was in the shower to check his mail so he could grab it. Bank statements for accounts I did not recognize. Investment portfolios indicate consistent withdrawals. All in his name, not mine. One evening, when Ryan was on a work call, I discovered his laptop open. My fingers trembled as I scrolled through his emails. A financial advisor received messages about dispersing assets and increasing guardian privileges. Screenshots were not available, so I remembered essential phrases, account numbers, and dates. Ryan ended his call prematurely. I saw him approaching and hastily went to a homework page, but his expression indicated he had observed something. "What are you doing on my computer?" Mine died. I needed to finish an essay. He gave me a long look. Use the desktop in the living room. Next time. That night, I overheard him on the phone again. No, she's getting suspicious. We need to accelerate the timeline. I pushed my ear against the bedroom door. Who was he speaking to? What's the timeline? The next day at school, I discovered something strange. My admission letter to Northwestern was missing from my backpack. When I arrived home, Ryan was waiting for me. The school called, he explained, his voice unnaturally calm. They're concerned about your mental state. Apparently, you've been acting erratically. What? No, they haven't. Emma, losing your parents is traumatic. It's normal to struggle. He took out his business card. Dr. Adams specializes in grief counseling for teens. I stared at the card. This was a trap, but I couldn't see the details yet. The therapy session began the following week. Dr. Adams appeared pleasant enough, asking about my feelings and dreams. However, her questions had a leading tone. Do you ever feel like you can't trust your own judgment? Like maybe others know what's best for you? I responded vaguely, fearing danger. Whatever Ryan had planned, this therapist was a part of it. Meanwhile, I continued digging. During a school computer lab session, I discovered our parents' obituaries online. It addressed surviving family, including Mom's sister, Aunt Claire, who had offered to take me in. However, Ryan had stated that she was unstable and lived abroad. I looked her up on social media and discovered that she lives in Chicago, is married, and has children. Definitely not foreign or unstable. Her last post was about missing her sister and wishes she could meet her niece. My hands shook as I typed a message from my private email. Aunt Claire, this is Emma. I need help. Her response arrived within hours. She had been attempting to contact me since the burial. Ryan had banned her calls and returned her letters. She drove to his place once, but he threatened to call the cops if she didn't leave. We planned to converse on a friend's phone during lunch. Hearing her voice so similar to Mom's made me cry. Sweetie, I've been so worried. Ryan won't let any family contact you. I told her everything. The disappearing money, the claims about debt, and the treatment sessions. She listened, her respiration quickening with each revelation. Emma, you need to get out of there. I can't. He's my legal guardian, not if we can prove he's stealing from you. I'm calling my lawyer. But Ryan must have been watching something because he confronted me that night. Who have you been talking to? No one. He took out printed emails from my private account. Lying to me now. My blood became chilly. How? How did you find them? I'm trying to protect you, he replied, his voice deeper and more frightening than I had ever heard. But if you keep fighting me, I'll have to take stronger measures. What's that supposed to mean? Dr. Adams thinks you might benefit from a more structured environment. There's a residential program for troubled teens. You can't send me away. I can if it's in your best interest. He leaned forward. Or you can stop this nonsense. Finish school quietly, and we'll revisit college options later. I was imprisoned, but Aunt Claire gave me hope. I simply needed to be smarter. I played the compliant niece attending therapy, refraining from asking questions and expressing gratitude for Ryan's care. Meanwhile, I recorded everything. I found an old voice recorder in Dad's belongings and began recording Ryan's calls when he assumed I was sleeping. The trust distributions are on schedule. He told me one night by her birthday, it'll all be transferred to the offshore accounts. She'll never know what hit her. I also began snapping images with a disposable camera I purchased with lunch money, bank statements left on his desk, legal documents he assumed I would not understand, and the Guardian report he was meant to file with the court, but never did. Weeks have passed. My 18th birthday was approaching, and with it my sole chance for freedom. However, Ryan's confidence was growing. He began talking about gap years, how I wasn't prepared for college, and how I could require long-term care for my trauma-induced paranoia. Then came the day when he brought home fresh documents, Just some paperwork for your therapy, he explained nonchalantly. But I've read everything now. This was not therapy paperwork, but a plea for extended guardianship, owing to mental incapacity. That night, I called Aunt Claire from a payphone near the school. He's trying to keep control past my birthday. Pack a bag, she instructed. Hide it. Be ready. My lawyer says we need one more piece of evidence, something that shows clear financial fraud. Can you get bank records? I'll try. The next morning, Ryan left for an early meeting. Here was my chance. I picked the office lock again and walked directly to his filing cabinet. There, in a folder labeled Personal, I discovered everything. Bank transfers from my trust to accounts in the Cayman Islands, fraudulent signatures on withdrawal forms, and a paper trail of systematic theft dating back months. I was snapping pictures of everything when I heard the front door, but it was too early for Ryan to return. I looked out the window. His automobile was in the driveway. He had never left. I knew you'd try again, he remarked through the doorway. He spoke calmly, but his eyes were cold. Dr. Adams warned me about escalating paranoid behavior. It's not paranoia if it's true. I held up the papers. You stole everything. I invested money for your future. You are too young to understand. Stop lying. The words flew out of me. I know about offshore accounts. I have recordings. His expression altered. The concerned brother's mask dropped, revealing something calculating and ruthless. You've got nothing. A troubled youngster is making outlandish charges against the brother who took her in, who believe you and Claire will. Claire, he chuckled. I have documents proving she's been harassing us, stalking and attempting to manipulate a grieving child for her own gain. My phone vibrated. A text from an unknown number. Get out quickly. He knows it came from Aunt Claire's lawyer. Ryan approached me. Give me the camera. I backed backward and clutched it. No, Emma, don't make this harder than it needs to be. He took out his phone. Just phone Dr. Adams, and you'll be in residential treatment by tonight. Is this what you want? I dashed past him down the hall, grabbed the hidden suitcase from my closet. He followed, no longer pretending to be calm. You cannot leave. I'm your guardian. I got to the front door, but he grabbed my arm firmly. You're making a mistake. The only mistake was trusting you. I ripped free and raced, not stopping until I arrived at the school. The security guy let me in, and I walked straight to my counselor's office. Mrs. Patel took one look at my face and closed the door behind me. What happened? Emma? I showed her everything, the images, the recordings, the mark on my arm, and she phoned the police while I called Aunt Claire. The cops arrived in 20 minutes, but Ryan had already called them. He stood in the school parking lot playing the concerned guardian brilliantly, and his voice, full of contrived fear, rang through Mrs. Patel's window. She has been spinning since her parents died. The therapist warned me that this might happen. Officer Catherine Grant calmly listened as Ryan told his story. I observed from behind the blinds as he showed her documents, most likely the same fabricated reports he'd been creating. Mrs. Patel squeezed my shoulder. We'll sort this out, she said quietly. When the officers finally entered, Ryan followed his eyes, meeting me immediately, cold and calculating behind his brotherly concern. Officer Grant introduced herself, and her partner, a young man named Daniel Lee, took notes. Your brother says you've been struggling. Officer Grant began gently. He's worried about you. I took out the disposable camera. He is plundering my inheritance. I have proof. Ryan's laugh sounded so sincere that I doubted myself for a moment. She has been captivated with this notion. Dr. Adams describes it as a coping mechanism, creating villains to blame for her loss. These aren't delusions, I argued, pointing to the images I'd taken. Look at these bank statements, transfers to offshore accounts. Officer Lee inspected the photos, and Ryan shook his head sadly. Those are investment accounts I opened for her future. Everything is properly documented and legal. So why hide them? Why lie about my parents dead? I never lie. I simplified things to keep you from experiencing financial hardship during your loss. Mrs. Patel came forward. Officers, I have known Emma for 3 years. She has never showed evidence of instability. These concerns appear to be very sudden. Ryan took out a folder. I have documentation from her therapist outlining her deteriorating mental state, paranoid delusions, breaking into my office, stealing documents. My hands trembled as I took out the voice recorder. Listen to this. He discusses relocating everything before my birthday. But when I hit play, just static came out. The tape had been wiped. Ryan must have discovered it and replaced it with a blank one. My proof was vanishing in front of my eyes. She's been recording me without my consent, Ryan remarked, his voice heavy with sorrow, another sign of her paranoia. Officer Grant looked at us, apparently hesitant. Miss, do you have any additional evidence? My Aunt Claire, she knows everything. The aunt who has been pursuing us. Ryan produced a restraining order request. I haven't filed it yet, hoping she will stop, but she has been fueling Emma's fantasies. Everything he said sounded so sensible that I began to rethink everything I thought to be true. Mrs. Patel spoke out again. Maybe we should call this and personally allow her to speak for herself. Ryan's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. She's manipulating a grieving child for financial gain. Then she won't mind explaining herself to the officers, Mrs. Patel responded. Ryan stepped closer to me when Officer Lee phoned Aunt Claire, his voice dropping low enough to be heard only by me. You are making a big mistake. I'm the only family member you have left that truly cares. You care about my money. I care about your future, but if you continue on this path, I will have no choice but to defend you from yourself. And Claire instantly answered, her voice crackling through Officer Lee's phone speaker. She detailed her attempts to contact me, the blocked calls, the returned letters, and referenced the will identifying her as co-guardian, which I was unaware of. Ryan's cool demeanor shattered somewhat. She is lying. There was no such provision. Then you won't mind providing the original will. Officer Grant said, of course it is in my safe at home, but I remembered the snapshot I'd taken that morning, the will naming both guardians. If only the camera hadn't been blank when processed. Wait, I still had the camera. I need to use the restroom, I said. Ryan stood. I'll escort her. She's capable of going alone, Mrs. Patel stated firmly in the bathroom. I carefully opened the camera. The film was still inside, undeveloped, and Ryan must have replaced the developed photos with blanks. My hands shook as I rewound the film slightly and then advanced it again, taking new shots of the bathroom tiles. If the previous images remained, they'd be double exposed, but may be discernible. When I returned and Claire was discussing the family dynamics to the authorities, and Ryan had isolated me from anybody who may have helped. She specified precise days and times she attempted to visit information that would be difficult to falsify. She's clearly rehearsed this story, Ryan continued, but his confidence waned. We'll need to investigate further. Officer Grant said in the meantime, Emma should remain somewhere neutral. She is my legal ward. She arrives home with, actually, Mrs. Patel added. The school can provide emergency placement for students in crisis. Emma can stay with our guidance counselor, Mrs. Catherine Morrison, who is licensed to provide temporary foster care. Ryan's face clouded. That is unneeded. I am her guardian. It's only for a few days while we figure this out, Officer Lee reassured him. Ryan's eyes were full of calculating. Fighting too hard would appear suspicious, and he nodded stiffly. If that's what's best for Emma. Miss Taylor arrived within an hour, a soft-spoken woman who'd guided countless students through difficult situations. As we prepared to go, Ryan hugged me, which appeared to everyone else to be brotherly, but his hold was too tight, his voice piercing. It's not over. You need me more than you realize. I finally felt comfortable enough to breathe that Miss Taylor's house, which was cozy and lived in with portraits of former pupils covering one wall. She brought me to a small guest room and offered me the solitude to call Aunt Claire. "Are you all right?" Aunt Claire's voice was filled with worry. "I am afraid he's destroyed the majority of my evidence. We will figure it out. My lawyer will file emergency motions tomorrow. Just stay safe." That night, I couldn't sleep because every passing automobile made me believe Ryan had come for me. Around 3 a.m., my borrowed phone buzzed a text from an unknown number. "You think you're safe? I have documents that will undermine your aunt's credibility. Come home immediately or I'll use them." I showed Miss Taylor in the morning, and she immediately phoned the authorities, but the number was untraceable. When questioned, Ryan denied sending anything, and Claire's lawyer, Mr. Daniel Williams, tried to expedite a hearing, but Ryan's lawyer contested every move. The following few days blurred together with legal meetings in which Ryan portrayed himself as the ideal guardian. Meanwhile, Dr. Adams filed reports portraying me as increasingly unstable. She's created an elaborate conspiracy to avoid processing her grief. Dr. Adams told the family court judge at a preliminary hearing, "Her brother has been nothing but supportive." I wanted to shout. Ryan had carefully prepared every word she spoke, and my outburst would only support her argument. So I sat calmly, allowing Mr. Bennett to speak for me. The judge, an elderly woman named Catherine Whitman, appeared distrustful of everyone. "I'll need to see financial records from both parties." Ryan quickly consented. Secure in his fabrications, however. That night, something unexpected happened. His financial advisor, Noah Lynn, called Aunt Claire's lawyer, who had been growing concerned about Ryan's requests and wanted to speak up. "He'll destroy me," Noah said at a covert meeting in Mr. Bennett's office, "but I can't be a part of this anymore. That girl deserves her inheritance." Noah revealed how Ryan had deliberately shifted money through intricate transactions, making it appear legal while depleting the trust. He had maintained records of everything as insurance against Ryan, turning on him. "This is exactly what we need," Mr. Bennett stated. "Will you testify?" Noah nodded grudgingly. "He's going to come after me." The following day, Noah's employer received anonymous allegations regarding financial impropriety, and his professional licenses were called into question. However, Noah had anticipated this, having documented Ryan's threats and manipulation. Meanwhile, I remembered something. Ryan had sold all of Dad's baseball stuff, claiming we needed the money, but I'd kept one piece assigned baseball from Dad's favorite player in my old room. If the property sale records revealed no debt, it would prove Ryan had lied about needing money. Miss Taylor took me to our former house, where the new owners, a young couple, let us in after I explained the baseball was still in my former closet beneath a loose board. I'd never informed anyone about, but I also discovered Dad's backup drives, which were stashed with a baseball. He always kept copies of everything I said, clutching the drives like gold. Back at Mr. Bennett's office, we discovered the discs included years of financial records. Every account, transaction, and document Ryan claimed didn't exist, including the college fund, life insurance, and trust details, all of which proved Ryan's claims. Ryan wasn't done yet. While we were eating dinner, Miss Taylor's house was broken into. Nothing valuable was taken, but my room was ransacked and the discs were stolen. He knew, I admitted, feeling deflated. He always knows we made copies. Mr. Bennett reminded me he can't destroy evidence that's already filed with the court. As the last hearing approached, Ryan became increasingly frantic, filing reports saying, "And Claire had a drinking problem, that I had been violent at school, and that Miss Taylor was coaching me." Each falsehood was more detailed than the one before it. Then Dr. Adams made a mistake in her most recent report. She highlighted information concerning my parents' deaths that I had never told her, things only Ryan knew. Mr. Bennett saw the mismatch instantly. "How did you learn about the bus hitting a pole?" he inquired during her deposition. "Emma never revealed that detail in your sessions," Dr. Adams faltered. "Ryan, must have told me as her guardian. He supplied background information, but you testified that you maintained absolute patient confidentiality. Why would Ryan know what Emma revealed in therapy?" Dr. Adams had been providing Ryan material from our sessions, which was against ethical norms, and she had been submitting reports he had written, signing her name to his words. Her license was immediately revoked, awaiting an inquiry on the morning of the last hearing. Ryan made one last play. He appeared with a new paper saying I had signed over my rights to the trust in exchange for him financing my tuition expenses. The signature looked great, but I had learned something from Dad. Check the date. I informed Mr. Bennett I was at school that day taking the SATs. There are records. Ryan's desperation had gotten the best of him, and the fake document disintegrated under inspection. Judge Whitman had seen enough. "Mr. Ryan," she replied, her voice severe, "the evidence clearly reveals systematic financial abuse and exploitation of a youngster under your care." Ryan attempted one final deception. "Your Honor, I've only ever wanted the best for my sister. If I made any mistakes, it was because I was trying too hard to protect her. Protect her from her own inheritance." Judge Whitman's tone was icy from her family. What is the truth regarding her parents' provisions for her guardianship was promptly transferred to Aunt Claire, and all financial accounts were stopped for a comprehensive forensic accounting. Criminal charges for fraud, forgery, and fiduciary breach were proposed. Ryan glanced at me one final time as court security carried him away. The mask had been removed, revealing the stranger who had supposed to be my brother. "You'll regret this," he said, but I didn't. For the first time since my parents' deaths, I felt free. The aftermath was tricky, and it required months of legal proceedings to recover the money. Some had been spent, and some had been hidden so cleverly that forensic accountants had to trace it. However, the majority of the money was recovered, plus fines and interest. I moved in with Aunt Claire and her family in Chicago and her children. My cousins I'd never met welcomed me enthusiastically. The house was chaotic compared to Ryan's immaculate apartment, but it felt lively and like home. Northwestern accepted my deferred enrollment, and with my fortune restored, I could finance it without taking out loans. But first, I took a year off to grieve, testify in Ryan's criminal trial, and reconnect with his estranged family. Ryan had been planning this since before our parents' deaths, researching guardianship rules and trust fund loopholes. There was no evidence that he caused the tragedy, but he was obviously prepared to profit from it. His financial advisor license was permanently revoked, and he was sentenced to 5 years in prison, with the possibility of parole in 3 years if he behaved well. He had lost everything. While attempting to steal I began treatment with a genuine counselor who helped me process not only my parents' deaths, but also Ryan's betrayal. Some days were more difficult than others, and I realized that the brother I thought I knew didn't really exist. On my 18th birthday, Aunt Claire organized a little celebration, and as I blew out the candles, I thought of my parents. They tried to protect me, to provide for my future, and Ryan nearly ruined their plans. But love and truth prevailed in the end. When the trust fund was fully restored, it was far greater than the initial documentation indicated. Thanks to Dad's cautious investing, I had enough money for college, graduate school, and a good start in life. But it wasn't the money that counted most. It was the family I'd rediscovered, the power I'd discovered, and the certainty that I could defend myself when necessary. Ryan had tried to convince me that I was weak, unstable, and unable, but he had been wrong about everything. I founded a scholarship foundation in my parents' memory, primarily for students who had lost their parents and experienced financial abuse. The first beneficiary was a girl whose uncle had emptied her college money. Hearing her story, which was so similar to mine, reaffirmed why speaking up was so important. Ryan sent letters from prison with apologies, explanations, and prayers for forgiveness, which I returned unopened. Some bridges, once burned, were not intended to be rebuilt. He'd made his decisions and now had to live with the consequences. Life passed on: college, new friends, internships, graduations, and the pain receded, but never completely disappeared. Trust became more difficult, so I double-checked everything, kept copies, and set boundaries. Ryan had given me vital lessons, but not the ones he had planned. Years later, after he was freed, he attempted to contact me via social media. The message was long, full of regret and promises of reform, and I read it once before, blocking him. My life no longer allowed for his manipulation. I became a financial consultant myself, focusing in preserving kids' inheritances. Every customer I helped was a small win against what Ryan had attempted to accomplish, and their gratitude reminded me that simply living wasn't enough. Using that survival to serve others gave it meaning. The girl I'd been, who had entirely trusted her elder brother, was no longer there. In her place stood someone stronger, wiser, more careful, but also more compassionate. Ryan tried to break me, but instead, he fashioned me into something indestructible. My parents would have been proud not of what I'd gone through, but of who I'd become as a result. Their love had protected me, even in death. The trust fund had been their final gift, but the real inheritance was the strength to fight for it. In the end, that's what mattered, not the money. Ryan stole, but the truth he couldn't hide. Not the family he tried to separate me from, but the bonds he couldn't break, and not the future he tried to control. But the one I'd claimed justice had been served. The protagonist had won, and my parents were finally at peace. I sat in Mr. Bennett's office watching the forensic accountants uncover transfer after transfer. Ryan had set up shell companies with names like Future Education Holdings and Guardian Trust Services to divert funds from my inheritance. He was thorough, the lead accountant mumbled, pointing out another dubious withdrawal. But he got greedy near the end. I observed a trend in the dates. Every large transfer occurred shortly after Ryan had attended parent-teacher conferences or school functions, which he had used as cover. Knowing I'd be busy, Aunt Claire arrived with coffee and sandwiches. Her husband Daniel had taken time off work to help coordinate things, and their teenage daughter Natalie offered to permanently share her room with me. Thrilled to have a cousin around, "We're converting the basement into a proper bedroom for you," Aunt Claire continued, giving me photographs from her phone. Daniel's already started painting. Ryan's lawyer filed a motion after motion to delay the asset freeze, claiming the transfers were legitimate investments for my benefit. When that failed, he claimed Aunt Claire had unduly influenced me. The warmth of having a real family again tightened my chest, but I couldn't relax yet. Then Noah Lynn revealed something crucial. Ryan had been speaking with a real estate developer about buying property in Costa Rica, a non-extradition country, and had planned to flee. He had booked flights for next month, and Noah gave us the email confirmations. One-way tickets. Mr. Bennett immediately alerted the prosecutor, and Ryan's passport was confiscated that afternoon. I watched from the courthouse steps as officials handed him the papers, and his face turned pale, then crimson with rage. That night, Miss Taylor's neighbor reported seeing someone in a hoodie near her house. The surveillance tape was too blurry to identify them, but we all knew Ryan was acting recklessly. The criminal trial date was set 3 months away, but Ryan remained free on bail with tight conditions. No contact with me. Forfeiture of his passport, weekly check-ins. I knew him, and rules had never stopped him before. I focused on practical concerns, such as opening my own bank accounts, and retrieving my social security card and birth certificate from Ryan's apartment, with Officer Lee accompanying me. The apartment felt much colder than before. In my room, I discovered things I hadn't noticed: missing photos of our parents' jewelry my mom had left me, and even my childhood diary, all concealed in Ryan's closet. He'd been collecting pieces of my life like trophies, Officer Lee said as he helped me pack. Your brother has serious control issues. Northwestern's admissions office sent me a personal letter stating that they had learned about my predicament through Mrs. Patel's recommendation, and that my position would be reserved for me when I was ready. The kindness of strangers continued to surprise me, but Ryan's new strategy involved discrediting everyone who'd helped me. He filed complaints against Miss Taylor with the school board, claimed Mr. Bennett had a conflict of interest, and even suggested Officer Lee had acted inappropriately. Each accusation required an investigation, which took time and energy. Miss Taylor's parents testified on her behalf, and the Bar Association backed Mr. Bennett. Officer Lee's body camera evidence immediately vindicated him. He's trying to isolate you again, and Claire remarked at one of our planning meetings, make you feel like everyone who helps you gets hurt. Natalie, my cousin, grabbed my hand and I began to withdraw, fearful of causing further disturbance. We're family, she firmly stated. We don't abandon each other. During the preliminary criminal hearing, Prosecutor Elena Rivera painstakingly brought out the evidence, which included fraud, forgery, theft, and false imprisonment. Ryan's defense attorney attempted to portray him as a bereaved brother who had made poor financial decisions, but the evidence was overwhelming, and the falsified signatures alone carried significant jail time. Ryan arrived during a recess, disregarding the restraining order. Court security retreated quickly, but not before he hissed, "You destroyed our family." "No," I answered, regaining my voice. "You did that yourself." Ryan's carefully crafted existence was crumbling as the judge upped his bail and imposed home arrest with an ankle monitor. In the meantime, the money recovery accelerated. Cayman Islands accounts were blocked through international collaboration. Shell businesses were dissolved, and my fortune gradually returned. The house sale couldn't be reversed. Dad's baseball memorabilia was distributed to collectors across the country, and some of my parents' belongings were lost forever. I began making lists of what was most important. Fortunately, Mom's quilts were still in storage, and Dad's watch was in Ryan's safe deposit box, which had been recovered by court order. The paperwork for the scholarship fund was completed, and the first candidates began to arrive, their stories both tragic and inspiring. I named it after both of my parents, not just in memory, but also in honor of their beliefs. Ryan's sentencing day came sooner than planned. He'd pleaded guilty in order to avoid a lengthy trial and hoped for leniency. The courtroom was packed with witnesses, including Aunt Claire's relatives, Miss Taylor, Mrs. Patel, and even Noah Lynn. I delivered my victim impact statement, in which I discussed shattered trust, stolen childhoods, damaged family relationships, but also resilience, truth triumphing, and the strength of true family. Ryan also spoke, and his comments seemed planned and hollow. He recalled our parents and how he wanted to honor their memories. The prosecutor reminded the court that he had been investigating guardianship fraud before they died. 5 years, Ryan's banking licenses were permanently revoked, and restitution for the full sum stolen plus damages was ordered. The judge's gavel fell with finality, and Ryan was sentenced to at least 3 years in prison with good conduct. As they carried him away in handcuffs, our eyes met for the last time. No mask remained, only the stranger who had supposed to be my brother. Aunt Claire drove us home to Chicago, away from the cameras, in questioning. After I gave a brief statement about the significance of oversight and guardianship arrangements, the house she had prepared was ideal. It was not as fancy as Ryan's flat, but it was warm and real. Natalie had put up string lights in my new room. Daniel had made special shelving for my books, and their golden dog appeared delighted to have me there. That first night at dinner, we spoke about everyday stuff like school movies and weekend plans. There were no lawyers, court dates, or financial records, just family being family. Northwestern began in the autumn, and I chose finance as my major with a minor in social work. The irony was not lost on me. Understanding money meant defending others from predators like Ryan, my roommate, a joyful girl from Minnesota who'd never heard my background, saw me just as Emma, a freshman with a complicated family situation, and the anonymity seemed like liberation. I joined a student advocacy group and helped build better resources for orphaned students. The administration listened and made changes, small efforts toward preventing others' victimization. Ryan's letters began arriving in my second semester, and I recognized his handwriting and returned them unopened. He tried lawyers and jail counselors, but the answer remained no. Graduation came with Aunt Claire's entire family roaring from the audience. I'd made the dean's list every semester, gotten internships at firms specialized in fiduciary law, and my thesis on guardian financial abuse received the department award. After receiving numerous employment offers, I decided to work for a nonprofit organization that protects minor inheritances. Although the pay was lower than that of a corporation, the objective was more important to me. My first case involved brothers arguing over their deceased parents' estate, and I guided them through mediation, helping them look beyond the money to what truly important. They left my office holding hands years past. I developed a purposeful life. Ryan completed his full sentence, no early release, and his attempts to contact me eventually stopped. I learned through legal channels that he had moved to a distant state and started over. The scholarship fund grew. Hundreds of kids benefited from my parents' legacy, and every graduation announcement seemed like a victory over what Ryan had attempted to steal. At a legal conference, I met another attorney who understood my commitment to justice. We took our time, and trust was difficult to acquire, but love found a way. On my wedding day, Aunt Claire escorted me down the aisle. Dad should have been there, but his sister's presence honored his memory. The reception contained Mom's favorite songs and Dad's favorite dishes. They were both present in spirit. My practice grew. I spoke before Congress on guardianship. Abuse laws changed slowly but steadily. Protections increased and oversight improved. Ryan never appeared again. I wondered if he was watching my triumph from a distance, if he regretted everything. But those thoughts faded fast. He'd made his decisions. I preserved one childhood photo, Ryan and me at Christmas before everything changed. Not for nostalgia, but as a reminder that evil can take on familiar faces. That trust must be earned, and that family is defined by actions rather than blood. The girl who had blindly trusted was no longer there. Instead, there was a woman who had turned tragedy into purpose and was protecting others. My parents' love had ultimately protected me through the family they trusted and the principles they instilled. Every case I won, every student who graduated debt-free, every legislation that was altered, everything came back to that moment when I resolved to fight. Ryan had attempted to steal my future. Instead, he had constructed my purpose. The money was recovered, justice was done, and the family was reunited. The greatest victory, however, was much simpler. I had survived, I had prospered, and I'd made certain that others would.